Hi, everybody, and welcome to this exciting episode of the Next Level Women podcast. I am beyond thrilled to have Kelly Bender as my special guest today. Kelly is uber successful and she has so much wisdom and so much knowledge she's going to impact on us today. And I cannot wait for this conversation. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thanks for having me, Joy. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. So, why don't you start by introducing yourself to our audience and telling us what you do?
Okay, yeah. So I run a tax and accounting firm, and I primarily focus on helping small business owners and entrepreneurs make sense of the world in which they live from a numbers perspective. So every small business owner loves to do what they do. Not every small business owner loves to take care of all of that annoying stuff on the back end, like keeping track of financial statements and understanding what they mean and filing tax returns and keeping all of that compliant and giving all of their money away to the government. And all of that feels overwhelming and most of the time not something where most entrepreneurs have a strong suit in. So we really come and support them because I am an entrepreneur who happens to be an accountant. So I get where they're at. I too am out here building an organization just like you are. I just happen to be good at numbers.
Oh my gosh, I love that introduction. I want to underscore something you just said about giving our money to the IR, well, for you to the IRS, for me to the CRA.
Yeah.
And that's not something I love to do. I don't look forward to paying my taxes. I want to keep as much money as I can to myself. Now, I know the government uses our taxes to do good things. I just feel like it's so much I have to pay. So, y- I'm guessing you help your clients with those legal tax strategies that helps them to keep more of their money, correct?
That's exactly what we do. Yeah. So I always say, I believe that you are probably a better steward of your money than the government. And what that means, and that's very much proven by fact, is that the average individual who has a realization of how hard they've worked for that money is generally a better steward of actually giving more. Most entrepreneurs are actually extremely generous in their giving. Uh, but the government hasn't done a very good job. And I don't care what government you're looking at, whether that be state, local, federal, none of them are doing a very good job because they're not as personally connected to how hard they had to work for that money. And they're generally spending it and wasting it in a lot of ways. So, yes, we absolutely, one of our core focuses is really tax strategy, in that the way most entrepreneurs approach taxes, unfortunately, is it something they think about later? And we flip that script and say, let's think about it before, make sure that your structure is correct from an entity perspective. What are the tax strategies that are in our code? Yeah, I live inside the IRS tax code. What are those strategies? How can we remain legal and ethical in what we do? But here's the hoop, let's play the game.
Yes. And this is a field that has fascinated me for as long as I can remember. And we're going to kind of delve into your expertise and how you help entrepreneurs. Um, when I read news headlines and I hear something like Jeff Bezos pays only $10,000 in taxes, or Elon Musk only pays $1,000 in taxes, like all of those headlines, I'm like, there is something these rich people know that many of us are not aware of. And these are legal tax strategies. So I I always want to expand my knowledge. I always want to hire the best accountants, like accountants who know all of these strategies and are able to structure my business and my money in a way that I keep as much as I make. So we're going to delve into those strategies. Well, maybe not particularly, but I want the audience to see what your expertise is and how you can help them to keep a lot of the money that they make. Now, before we go into that, I want to talk about your entrepreneurship journey. Now, before we hit the record button, we were chatting and you were talking about all of these amazing firms you've acquired, the acquisition you've made, and how you've grown your business to the level it is now. But I want you to take us back to where your journey started and how you've been able to create this massive success for yourself.
Well, I'll start by saying I didn't do it alone. So we did talk offline that I am a very outward Christian and believer, and Jesus and God are like forefront in my life. So I just want to make sure that it's clear when I say that the success that we've come to find in this moment is not by myself, because I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for, kind of being saved first from my own mistakes. But when I look back at my entrepreneur journey, I didn't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to have actually a stable job and a consistent income and a life that felt safe. Life, however, is not safe and sometimes throws things at you that you weren't expecting. And who we are in that moment determines lots of things. We get to choose whether we sit in that moment or whether we pivot and make a change. And so for me, when I found myself in a place where I had small children and I had to decide whether I would stick with a corporate job that would take me away from sort of giving them time and attention at home, or whether I would go try to do this thing on my own and fumble my way through it, but be present and available to raise my kids. I chose the latter. And so for many years, it was just sort of a grind of getting out there and doing enough work to pay the bills, but being able to be present for my small children at the time. And then over time, as I developed working with largely small businesses, I started to see patterns and see that these small business owners were people just like me. And really, I just had a knack and a gift to see how they could be more successful with the exact same resources they had by implementing some strategies and techniques in how they operated. And I could give them peace of mind in their back end financial services to support them as they grew their businesses, and we could keep track of everything on the back end. So that was just sort of how the plan developed. And then again, had some employees. My husband and I have worked together for a long time. And then we had one employee and, we had an admin. And I said, I see other accountants in the area that are retiring. And I thought, why don't we just maybe try to grow a little faster by acquiring one of these retiring accountants? And that's then started an acquisition journey. So we've had 5 acquisitions since then, and we've grown to a fairly good sized regional tax and accounting firm that services small business owners in our communities.
That's incredible, and congratulations on your success. I want to kind of peel back the layers a little bit. You talked about your faith, and I'm a woman of faith as well, so I can relate to what you said about you didn't grow this by yourself. You had God's help. And I personally believe that there is so far that our human capacity can take us. And then there is a point where supernatural forces take over and gives you exponential success. So that's my belief. And I want you to tell us about your faith and how your faith has played a role in your success.
So I think that and we mentioned this, earlier, is that to me, my faith is a part of who I am. Um, And so that is first and foremost. And really, when I look at my business, and I say this to, a lot of my business owners, is that when I now look at my business, I look at it through the lens of how God sees that business. Instead of saying it's compartmentalized, that like, oh, I have my business and I keep it over here, and then I have God over here. And really what it is just the lens to see the opportunity in front of me. The other thing about being a person of faith and growing a business. And I think this is important when we're talking with other, particularly Christians, is that sometimes the risk is to say, well, if God wants that to happen, it will. And while that's a well-intentioned statement, I think that faith without action is
Right.
is not really faith. It's just throwing it out there because you're not willing to take the step in. And so God doesn't call us to just, sit around and wait for him to be the lightning strike that changes the trajectory of our life. He calls us to action in our faith. And so if we don't take action steps, if we don't employ discipline,
Mm.
then we're not going to walk into the path that God has designed for us. And it doesn't mean that I know exactly what that path is, because I know enough to know that God might have plans way bigger than I can dream and fathom. And I truly believe that. But I still have to step forward and I have to take action steps and I have to employ discipline and do things. Otherwise, God's not going to meet me while I just sit back and hope that something happens. That's not how that works.
You are so right. And yeah, I absolutely know that scripture that says faith without works is dead. And what you said about discipline and diligence, the Bible also says, seest thou a man diligent in his ways, he shall stand before kings and not before mean men. So diligence, discipline, all of those things are so required before we can get to success. So thank you for pointing that out. I want to go to the way you've created success and how, like, I know you mentioned about you decided one day to start acquiring retiring accountants. What gave you the audacity to think about that? Like, did you have any fear or limiting beliefs about your business success? Like, how did that pan out for you?
Some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know have a unrealistic view of themselves. And I say that because I probably should have had more fear than I did. But sometimes being a little bit dumb and naive leads you to take action steps that you needed to take. And if you were afraid and let that fear cripple you, you wouldn't do what you should have done. So I wish that I could say I probably had the appropriate amount of fear going into it. I probably didn't. I wasn't looking back, I wasn't prepared for that
Mhm.
acquisition at all. I didn't have any systems or processes in place. I just naively thought I was smart enough to do it. And but what that taught me was how to learn how to build out an enterprise that could work beyond myself. And so, a lot of individuals start off as solopreneurs and their own person. And at a certain point, though, if you're running a growing business, you're limited by your own time and energy, and you can't do any more. And so you become the bottleneck in your own company. And if you want to grow or scale, then you're basically going to have to get out of your own way. And the way that we
Mm.
do that is we create systems and processes that allow other people to come alongside us and expand the same things we were doing in a way that teaches them how to follow the same path. And then the entire process becomes duplicatable. So that first acquisition, and I do have a funny story about that one because I actually tried to acquire the first firm we bought. We made an offer on 2 years before we bought it from the retiring accountant, and we were turned down. And so these are those little God moments you see. Looking back, though, we were not anywhere prepared financially or emotionally for that first acquisition when we were turned down. So we were turned down by a better offer from somebody else, and we didn't get to buy that firm. Fast forward, we continued to grow our practice. And 2 years later, I received a call from a colleague, somebody that I had known in a completely different setting. And they said, I've just seen how you're encountering life in the accounting world. My company that I work for wants to sell this tiny little accounting firm over in the other side of town. Would you have any interest in it? It was the same firm, and we bought it for $50,000 less than what it would have been for sale 2 years prior. So, God has a funny way. It's just that was, we weren't ready at that first
Mm.
time, but the same thing came back to us. And we weren't entirely ready the second time, but the timing was much better. The opportunity was better. And that really was a launching point again, at that time, that was when one of my stepsons, he, works for us, and he was just getting out of college, and it was an opportunity for him to come in. And he really, stepped in and built that acquisition from the ground up with us. And we were able to start getting these systems and processes in place. And so, that is sometimes how God works, is that maybe it's not yes right now, but it might be it later, even if, that dream was still there, but I just had to have the patience to wait for it to be the right time.
Wow. That's such an amazing story. Like it's almost unbelievable that the same firm you got to buy from someone calling you to, it's almost like fiction, but it's real, right? Because it happened to you, right? So I'm so grateful for your experience because it is inspiring me and I know it's going to inspire my audience too. So I like one thing you touched on was the audacity not to have the fear, right? And I believe that as entrepreneurs, that's so vital for us to achieve success because is that blind faith and taking the step and believing that everything is going to work out. And that's something I am learning right now for where I'm at in my business. So thank you for saying that. I want to go to how you do your marketing and sales before we go to your branding because you have an amazing branding. I want to find out how you got to that place. But before then, tell us how do you do your marketing and how do you close sales?
Well, this is not going to be my strongest suit, Joy, because I come from an accounting world. So I am not what I would call in any way, shape, or form a great salesperson. I just speak from what I know. We largely have grown much through referrals and acquisition because we've had multiple acquisitions and then referrals that come in through some connection to either us as a firm and all of the various people that work for us, or some networking organizations and things like that. And only recently, within the past about year and a half, have I made a very conscious choice to sort of become more public facing and start speaking out because I feel compelled to say that what we have done is worth showing and worth talking about because there are lots of people out there in the world who say that they're doing something, but in reality, they haven't done the work. And I looked and I said, I've actually done the work and we've put this thing together and it is successful. And that was my personal calling was God was like, what are you afraid of? To go out and
Mm,
just say, that yes, you have not because you did it by yourself, but because you dared to dream bigger than what you could hold and met where God, and again, I don't even believe I'm there, but where, what if God's dreams are even bigger than I can hold in my brain? So
mm.
that's really been marketing for us is not a ton other than just to talk about what we do and how we help put clarity and sanity behind the scenes to small business owners and help them keep more of their money.
Wow, that is so powerful. And I love that you are sharing your story and sharing the success you've made because I feel like for us women, we need more people who have created success because your story is inspiring me, is inspiring our listeners. And so, like, it's going to have a huge ripple effect in the world because it's going to create more successful businesses. And I think that's that's one of the joys that God derives from us being successful because we get to spread that goodness for other people to see that it's possible for them. And I love that you said you're not very great at sales because many women identify as not being salespeople. So for everyone listening, you can grow a multi seven-figure business and not be good at sales. Kelly's the proof, right? So thank you for saying that. Okay, I want to go to your branding. How did you land at this branding? Because I've been on your website, your socials is so well put together. Tell us about that.
So I guess like the personal branding side is the same thing, just being around great people and seeing what it is. My personal brand is Life Untaxed. And really what that came from is this combination of obviously I'm in the tax world and at a base level, I provide tax and accounting services, but I somehow came upon the idea that also, although we have a financial taxation that has to occur. Life in general is taxing, right? And it can, bring us down. And I believe that our businesses should be vessels for growth and prosperity in the world and not, kind of bringing us down. So that was sort of where I came up with this untaxed idea of being, not necessarily, I love when people don't have to pay any tax. So financially untaxed, but also emotionally untaxed is that, running and growing a business can be overwhelming. And if you don't approach it with the appropriate amount of clarity when you kind of walk through some of these difficult seasons, you can lose yourself in that. And so I just, kind of same thing, talk about those and they interplayed well. And that was how I went with it. I also have a very, from a visual perspective, my brother is exceptionally talented and does all of my visual like branding. And so I just take my ideas to him and he makes things pretty.
It does look very pretty, absolutely pretty. Now, I want you to tell us about your experience running your business and being a mom as well. Like, how did you find that intersection with your personal life and your business life? Tell us about that.
So being a business owner and is like secondary, right? So when you're a parent, your first priority, of course, outside of your faith is your family, or it should be. And so I I think that for me, what I definitely did uh, is that I've restrained the growth in the business to what I could handle in the season that I was in. And that's okay. And I think more people need to hear, particularly women, when we're told that we can have it all, I don't agree with that because you really can't be 100% running a growing enterprise business and being 100% present mom, wife. Like there, you don't have that many 100%. So if you want to say, I can do both, you can, but you're never going to be able to give 100% of yourself in any one direction. And having that reality check of that you are going to have to make choices about where your best priorities lie is okay. And that's because it's a season. So for me, I had my kids really young. I'm, very blessed, but they're all grown now. So my youngest is 19. And so now in this season, where as my kids got into teenage years and the business was growing, I could throw more of myself toward the business when I couldn't do that when they were 5, 6, 8 years old. That just wasn't going to be a possibility. And that means that, for me, the journey is that I'm doing this now at my age. That's okay. It doesn't mean that I missed out on anything. It was just a different priority focus. And so my business took second priority at that moment instead of them. And I think that's what we have to learn as parents, as mothers, when we're out there is that and anybody that's telling you that they're doing all of it well, they're lying. Like you just can't. So it's okay and give yourself permission in whatever season you're at to be okay with what you believe is your best priority and not feel guilty that you didn't do something else. Not everybody's meant to build big businesses while they have small babies. That's okay. Do it later.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that because I can so relate with all you've said, especially for the people in my world right now. Many of them have little kids, and I find that they feel like they're behind. They're comparing themselves to other people on Instagram and seeing all this success on Instagram, and they feel like somehow they are behind and they're not creating success. So I just love that you've said that. It's going to speak to so many people listening right now to give themselves grace to say, I am in this season of life where I have tiny kids. It's okay that my business isn't growing as fast as I would like. I am choosing to enjoy the process. And when that time comes, just like Kelly, who has adult children now, she can throw herself into the business. So thank you so much for saying that. Tell us about your specific mindset practices. How do you keep up your mindset so that it aligns with your business goals?
So I read a lot. I think that's probably one thing is that I do love to read and learn and listen a lot. And the reason I do that is that I'm constantly curious and inquisitive of what other people are, doing and talking about, but also in those readings and, studying other individuals is finding where I fit in that and seeing myself in their story and saying, okay, I see where somebody's talking about that, and that's where I see a strength of mine. When it comes to daily mindset, I'm sort of a quieter morning person. So just the natural discipline of my life is that I like to have more quiet time first in the morning in order to do my own kind of reading and reflecting and planning for my day. And then when it comes to just the ongoing daily through life mindset, again, I think that comes from continually remembering what your true focus should be in running your business and not getting hung up on the small things. Life will always throw a lot of things
Mm.
at you, and just constantly reminding yourself of what the big picture is, what the main goal is, having bigger ideas instead of getting hung up on small stuff. I think so many times people let the little things of the day really change the trajectory of the rest of their day. And if you're constantly kind of elevated in the idea that there's really one or two big things that are important, the rest of everything else just falls into place. And that helps how you interact with the people around you too, particularly when you have employees and staff, constantly reminding everybody that, is that really what the focus is here? Are we spending too much time on this, one thing, or should we be getting to the end goal? Which again, for us might be just, are we servicing well? Are we asking the right questions? Are we taking care of that need? All the other stuff doesn't matter.
Wow, that is so, so profound. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to go back to your expertise. I know many people are listening right now. They're all entrepreneurs. My listeners are all entrepreneurs. Tell us about the specific types of small businesses you work with and what the next step will be if someone is listening and they want to take the next step to explore what working with you will be like.
So small businesses are a broad term, right? And people come in all shapes and sizes. The big things that I talk about with small business owners and where they struggle is that there's a lot of great information on the internet that can do you right or do you wrong. And unless you're walking alongside of somebody who understands what your personal goals are, there's really not one size fits all when it comes to, at least from a proper entity like legal and tax structure. And that's a very personal decision. And so it depends on so many factors. And I think that so many times small business owners just kind of jump before they have a plan, which I love about them, but you need a little bit of some guardrails to put you in the right vehicle so that you can get to where you want to go. And if you're in the wrong type of car, you're not going to get to where you want to go. So, uh, that's really how we approach conversations with small business owners is to make sure that one, you're in the right vehicle, that the entity that you're using is correct for you, and then making sure that you're finding the right way to take deductions legally, you're keeping track of things correctly. The easiest way I have, I guess obviously anywhere on the internet you can find us, but the easiest way is I actually just that was the core. I wrote a book about how to start a small business, and so that was my continual conversation that I feel like I've had for the past 20 years. And so that was my most recent endeavor was that I wrote a book on how to start a business and just how to have that conversation with yourself about easy steps, practical steps about what to go through in kind of setting up yourself for success as you get started.
Incredible. Is the book available on Amazon?
It is.
Okay, I'm gonna grab the link and add to the show notes for those listening to us on the podcast, and it will be in the description if you are watching us on YouTube. So, Kelly, when someone is listening right now and they're saying, "Oh, I want to explore working with Kelly's firm," what should their next step be?
So I'll give you a link in the show notes. Yeah, easiest step is to just reach out. We have, kind of a easy link that says, look, talk about working with us. We'll talk with you for 15 minutes to start or so and just see where you're at and what your needs are and whether or not this is something that's a good fit for us to help you. If it's not, find me anywhere on social. And if you're not yet at a point where you can kind of pay for professional services, I try to give a lot of free tax advice on the internet, although you shouldn't take all that at, uh, it doesn't always apply to everybody, but I do try to give people good tax tips and ideas about how to think about, not just taxes, but running a business, and things like that.
And all those are available on your website or on your socials.
Yes, both.
Okay,
Hmm.
fantastic. So those links will be in the show notes and in the description. This has been a fantastic conversation, Kelly. But before I let you go, I want you to think back to your 21-year-old self. If you could speak to her right now, what would you say?
Dream bigger
Mm,
and stop being so afraid. I think that for a long time, and I don't, it's lots of reasons, but I think that when I look back at the person that I was at 21, I was sort of afraid of the world, and I was definitely afraid of what other people might think if I dared to speak up or say something that, might offend somebody. And I wish that I would have maybe found that voice a little earlier to just go back and say, like, I don't know why you lived so afraid or so small uh, for so long. And it's okay to, dream a little bit bigger and have somebody think you're completely crazy, and say it out loud. And, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't come true. Oh, well.
mm. Wow, that is so profound. And those words will be ringing in my ear all through this day, all through this week, because I need to kind of imbibe everything you've said because many times I feel afraid. I worry about what people think about me. And yes, to create the level of success I want to create, I need to learn to be bold, not to be afraid, not to be afraid of what other people will think. So thank you so much for those words of wisdom. It's been incredible having you on the show, Kelly. Thank you so much for spreading your light in the world and for showing other women what's possible. You are an inspiration.
Thank you so much for having me today, Joy. This was fun.
You're welcome.